All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Lakota Board of Education to order. Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Mr. Lovell?
Here.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Here.
Mr. Parnell?
Here.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Here. If you'd please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Jenny, any discussion? Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. We've had a lot of exciting happenings in the district with all of the state championships and such going on. I'm sure I'm going to miss things, so I'll apologize up front. But I do know for East, we have the boys who made the Final Four in soccer. The boys also placed second for golf in the state, and then for girls cross country, they placed second, and girls golf placed third. So those were all exciting accomplishments for East. And then at West, we just had the West Band return from the Band of America competition, where they made the semifinals for the first time in school history, as well as you may have seen that the girls soccer team won state. So that was very exciting. Linda and Mr. Miller and I were all there to be able to witness that, and it was a nice event. So also, I know there's been some discussion, we just said the Pledge of Allegiance, if we do that in our schools as well, and we do that in all of our schools. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. So with that, Matt, superintendent's comments?
Just a quick comment, so thanks for catching all of us up on all that going on. Also, the Board of Education went to the Capitol Conference last week and got to see 5 of our student groups present, which is huge for us and I think for our kids and the staff as well. We had 25, I think 24, 25 students that went up and had presentations as well from Mrs. Fuller and Mrs. Betcher, who are in the back, and then 2 of our board members, Mrs. Casper and Mrs. Schaefer, on the community conversation. So I think we were represented well in Columbus.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Mrs. Logan?
I'm going to have several comments later on in the agenda, so we can keep going.
All right, with that, we'll move to student spotlight. Betsy, are you? We have our National Merit semifinalists.
Good evening. Each year, approximately 1.5 million juniors at 21,000 high schools across the United States take the PSAT. Only 16,000 students, that's 1%, are named National Merit semifinalists. This year, 11 of these scholars are from Lakota. Our semifinalists who are with us tonight will now introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their interests and their future plans. Come on.
Hello, my name is Alex Baston. I'm from Lakota East, and I plan to major in psychology.
Hello, my name is Kaya West. I go to Lakota East, and I plan to major in public policy.
My name is Eve Biting, and I want to major in political science, then go to law school.
My name is Caroline Rice. I'm from West, and I plan on going into pre-vet with a marine biology focus as well.
Hi, I'm Megan Hoke. I'm from East, and I plan on majoring in biology.
Hi, my name is Tanya Kukreja, and I think I'm going to go into biology.
Is that everybody? All right. Well, we'd love for you to join us up front, and thank you. We're so pleased and proud of your accomplishments and all the hard work it took to get there. If you'd like to just come up here. caller has a takeaway for you. Yes.
Oh, that was good. That's all your years of sending and giving you a T-shirt.
All right, now we'll move to staff spotlight.
Deputy Green, if you could come forward, please.
Oh, Jody Green.
As probably most of you know in this room, or nearly all of you, Deputy Jody Green is our SRO at Liberty Junior and Woodland Elementary Schools, and he is our staff spotlight person that we're recognizing tonight for this meeting. Last month, he noticed an 8th grade student clasping his throat with his hands when stepping off the school bus. Deputy Green performed the Heimlich maneuver and was able to dislodge a piece of gum the student was choking on. Deputy Green's a 20-year veteran of Butler County Sheriff's Office, 7 years as one of our SROs here at Lakota. In addition to being an SRO, he is also a track and basketball coach. And, interesting fact, he has been seen teaching dance moves during Hawk's Choice at Liberty Junior. So we want to congratulate Deputy Green for all he does for our district, but also for saving this young man's life. So congratulations.
I want to thank the district for allowing me to be a SRO. It's been a great honor to work for this district. It's one of the best districts ever. For my son coming from Fairfield, coming over here and to see the difference, it's been awesome. Thank you for having me have the opportunity to do what I do for the kids. Thank you.
Matt,
We'd love to
Matt, do we have pictures
Of him
of the dancing?
Or could you show us some, could you show us some today?
There might be a video out there somewhere.
Well,
like to
thank
see
you for
some.
your service and all you do for our students every day and the relationships that you've built with the students you serve.
Thank you.
Now you gotta be in the middle.
All right, this brings us to our first opportunity for public comment. We have 3 minutes per person, and we'd like you to state your name and address when you come to the mic. I do have some sign-ins. I'm not sure if they want to speak at the first public comment or the second. The first opportunity is only pertaining to things that are on the agenda, and then the second opportunity opens it up to anything you'd like to say to us. So if I read your name of a person who signed in, if you'd like to defer to number 2, just kind of wave me off and I'll go to the next name. So first I have Jeremiah York. Okay, then come forward if you have something pertaining to the agenda.
Jeremiah York, 9515 Woodland Hills Drive, Westchester, 45011. Busing should be approved for 9th and 10th graders. They're too young to drive and must primarily rely on their parents or carpool to get to school. Parents who are busy themselves getting ready for work to face the onslaught of rush hour must also provide rides for their young teenage children. Lakota's annual operating budget is $177 million a year. Busing would account for $2.7 to $4.5 million a year, and yet this service was cut in 2011 and terminated for the last 8 years. This is a dreadful shame because busing is one of the most basic and helpful services a school district can provide. When government school costs and services are massively expanding, spending millions on providing students their own personal computer to take home, expanding daycare services, and hiring more police officers, it's interesting that it'll be at least 8 full years until this service is provided again. School busing was cut as a result of levy defeats. School sports fees also skyrocketed as a result. However, busing is a very small percentage of the total annual budget. Why was busing and sports fees chosen? They were chosen because cutting these services directly impacts parents the most, and it directly impacts the most parents. Though taxpayers already pay millions a year, losing these services would compel parents to pay even more. That's how you pass a school levy. Shortly afterward, a new operating tax was in place. School busing should never be cut, but what should never happen again is that we tolerate it being pinpointed as a weapon against us to try and force us to pass levies in the future. Let's all make sure everyone understands that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Aaron Short.
I wrote this down. Aaron Short, my address is 6434 Fountains Boulevard, Westchester, 45069. Thanks for allowing me to speak to you guys today. My name is, again, Aaron Short. I'm a Westchester resident for the last 6.5 years. I have a career in management at an IT firm. I am the current sitting president for the Lakota East High School PTSO. I'm actively involved in many other community organizations, but most importantly, I am a parent of 2 high school students, 1 freshman, 1 sophomore. I have had the pleasure of meeting and speaking with all of you that are currently sitting on our board. Being on our Board of Education is a thankless job, so I want to first thank all of you for the time that you devote to our district. I have no doubt that every single one of you is making decisions based on what you believe is the best for all of the Lakota stakeholders. My comments today are regarding the reinstating of busing for high school with regard to the financial forecast. After reading the details on the 5-year forecast and reviewing the 3 different scenarios that were posted online today, at least I grabbed them today, I have more questions than I have answers. This vote feels rushed to me. I wonder what the hurry is. I understand the hurry with regard to trying to institute this for next school year. I get that that has to be a decision now, but why next year? Why not take the time, really understand the numbers and our scenarios that are ahead of us, and maybe push it to the year after? It's worth looking into the long-term effects. I don't feel it is responsible to add a recurring expense to a forecast that already shows a deficit. If we don't make any busing changes, our 5-year forecast has a deficit beginning in year 4, and it doesn't feel like it's responsible to add this on top of that without addressing what's going to happen. Why aren't we looking at paying off our debt? It looks like it's about $1.7 million a year that we pay on principal and interest on some debt. I'm not sure what the balances are on those or how we can pay them off early or if there's early payoff fees, but it's something that maybe needs to be looked into to improve our income. I know that the Facilities Committee is looking into a large building update plan, and I know that there's not a lot of numbers around that, and I know that we're still going to be talking about that, but in terms of a 5-year forecast that has a deficit and we're adding more debt, where does that fall into our financial plan? Yes, having to self-transport my high school freshman and sophomore is a pain point. Yes, busing would be extremely convenient, especially for those of us in the workforce, but what about the long-term cost? How will we find revenue for the extra expense? I'd rather take on a scheduling burden and find a way to transport my children to and from school than be fiscally irresponsible. I moved my family to Westchester in 2013 because we were fleeing a different local Ohio school district that was in financial emergency and was under state control. They didn't have the foresight for a number of reasons to support themselves when the tax money
Erin?
started decreasing.
Can you just wrap up real
Yep.
quick?
I've seen what it takes to a community or what it does to a community to ask for levy after levy. I know Lakota is no stranger to that and the community divide that it brings with it. I'm asking you to use taxpayer money wisely and not for something that simply feels like you're doing something good.
Thank you. All right, next we have, I believe it's Kathy Gayhart.
Hi, my name is Kathy Gayhart, and I am at 5899 East Sonora Drive. I'm going to make this really brief because I didn't know what I was signing up for. This is my first board meeting to attend, and like
Welcome.
my predecessor, I thank you guys. We moved into the district in 2017, and I have 2 boys in the Freedom Elementary School, so I'm not quite here yet, but I want to understand what's going on. I was in a school that lost a levy, and we lost spring sports the year that I was graduating, so I know the pain, but I'm also a CPA and accountant, so I look at the numbers. I want to know where is the funding coming from. If there's a deficit in the future, to me that doesn't make sense. My mom actually researched why there was no busing right now, and what she had found is it's linked to actually busing kids that don't even go to this district. So I get that. I understand that. So I just encourage you guys to make the best choices for what's in the future, the best interest of the future of the district, because it is a good district, and I want to stay that way.
Thank you. All right, I have Jenna, Michael, sorry, second, okay. And that's all who we have signed in. If there's anyone else who would like to address the board, they may come forward at this time. All right, seeing no one, we'll move forward to committee reports, Board Policy Committee. Oh, I guess, sorry, I didn't address any of the questions. I apologize. Been a while since we've had public comment. Out of practice. Jenny or Matt, would you like to comment? Or
Was there any, I don't know if there were any questions, there's more comments, I think. Was there anything that you wanted to hit?
I felt like one was what caused us to cut the busing in the past? And was that before you were here, Jenny?
I think it was one of the first things that happened when I came in. And it was one of the things that was cut. We went to state minimums. And then what I recall is even from the 2013 levy, we prioritized things through a community survey and many community conversations. And high school transportation, while it was on the list, it didn't rise to the top. And so it has kept off of our list. And we've talked about it a lot, quite a bit. I know Mr. Passarge has pulled simulations with our transportation department quite a few times to look at the financial implications that it would cause the district. But hopefully that helps. But yeah, I was here not very long when that all transpired, so.
All right, thank you, Jenny.
One of the other questions, though, I did write down debt payoff. So one of the things that is a little different about the debt that we incur as a district. So, for example, with your home, you take out a mortgage and you can refinance and you can pay off. You can go and you can pay more on your principal and you can pay it off earlier. The way that our debt is structured, if we wanted to pay something off earlier, we would have to refinance it and shorten the term. And traditionally in the district, when we have looked at refinancing, it was for a savings, so that we would actually save our taxpayers on the interest expense. And we've done that several times since I've been here, and I know we've saved over $6 million in interest expense toward, and that's a direct relationship to our taxpayers. Not saying it wouldn't be something that we wouldn't look at. We're constantly looking at all of our details to see what is in the best financial decision for the district, but just that we don't have that option to pay additional monies without going through and refinancing and restructuring all of our debt. So hopefully that
So
helps.
with those savings, we've saved the taxpayers pay about $1 million less than what was originally passed through the
Correct.
refinancing efforts. Is
Correct.
that my understanding?
We are collecting $1 million less. Yes. Yep.
All right. Anything else? All right, we'll move to Board Policy Committee. Apologies.
Great. Is Rob here this evening?
He is not.
Okay, so we have a second read for policy 3113. That is the conflict of interest policy that was brought up at the last meeting. So as a reminder, our staff, our teachers specifically, follow Ohio ethics laws when it comes to being able to tutor students that they could possibly have coming up or have in their class. We have current policy on the books here in the district that basically trumps that ethics law and says that if we put systems and structures in place here in the district, our teachers can tutor students as long as the forms are filled out. When this came, and processes are followed, when this policy came up to the policy committee, and Todd, you are more than welcome to jump in at any point, the concern that we had at that point, or what Rob had brought up, is that basically by putting our staff in a position that they could violate the Ohio ethics laws, it also puts the district in a bad spot as well in the event that a process might not be followed or something would happen. And so the recommendation on this policy is basically to follow state law and to say we as a district believe that the paper that the teachers signed, that Ohio ethics violations, needs to be the standard of truth that we're operating under and not go outside of that. Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, you hit it right there. I mean, it protects, I think it protects our teachers, is what I think it does. And us.
Has the ethics law changed, or this is the same?
Mhm.
Is this Neola's recommendation that we tighten this up?
Correct, yep. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Because of liability?
It is. I mean, basically what it comes down to is that we can put processes and systems in place through HR, what have you. If that breaks down and something happens, our teachers are liable. And, the thought is, and I agree, is that we shouldn't be putting our teachers in a position that has them liable with Ohio ethics violations.
Yeah. Pretty clean
So
in
it
that
would be
regard.
it would be my recommendation that the policy that's written is what we have on books. And I don't know the history in the district of why Lakota decided to add language to it or anything like that. Maybe somebody else has that, but I don't.
We're definitely an outlier on that too, in terms of other districts. I don't know of another district that has it like we do. I think it puts us at risk.
It was a lot of board discussion when we did the rewrite
Okay.
for all of the policy, but I'm fine with supporting that.
Okay. It just seems to me like it's the better place to put our teachers in,
Right.
to support them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Community Engagement Committee, Kelly?
Sorry, but we do need we need an approval of that policy.
I
Sorry.
apologize.
It's okay.
So moved.
Second.
Jenny, please call the roll.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. Community Engagement.
Do you want to, we have some community conversations on the books. Do you want me to read those?
Sure.
We have, next Monday night, we have a finance community conversation at Lakota West at 6:30, where Jenny will give a brief overview and then we'll have a conversation. We have one on 12/3, which is just West freshman students at 11:30. We had one scheduled for December 2nd, a culture in the district one. We've moved that to January 9th at 6:30 at Lakota East. And then 114, it looks like there's one we're going to be doing at Lakota West at 6:30 for grandparents who have custody of their grandchildren. And a coffee chat on 12/4, 8 a.m., Einstein's. What else am I missing?
Thank you.
I think that's it.
I would love, and I think I've mentioned this before, but as we kind of move forward, I know that we all do our very best to get to the conversations, but I know that I often have conflicts, especially in the evening and during the day. If at the upcoming board meetings, if there's ever an opportunity just to highlight the last conversation and maybe some of the, I mean, we don't have to everything, but what are
Right.
some of the high-level conversation that came out of that, some things that maybe you think the board should know? It would just be helpful.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else would find that helpful or not, but I would.
Matt generally does a recap at the end of those conversations. That might be really helpful.
Yeah, I could just
to share out.
reiterate it here.
Right.
I don't want to
I'm glad
create a
do
ton of
that.
work. It would just be helpful. Since we do
Yeah, it's a good
use
idea.
those to inform decisions, it'd be great to have that. Thank you.
Makes sense.
Thank you for that feedback. Anything else with community engagement? All right, Butler Tech?
Butler Tech will meet tomorrow evening. I do want to note and perhaps have a moment of silence. We've lost a Butler Tech board member.
Oh, no.
And his name is Mr. Tom Alf. He was the representative for Hamilton, a wonderful student advocate, very student-focused and very positive spirit on the Butler Tech board, and just really joined a year ago when they became active on the board and joined the Butler Tech board. So if we could have a moment of silence.
Certainly, please.
Thank you. We're prepping for the fifth day experience, which is coming up starting in February, and that is where students will have an option to take their Fridays for 14 weeks, and they can do an internship, they can do a mentorship, they'll have a full day where they're not in class. We've managed to arrange the schedules so that they're continuing to have the same number of hours, but they have that freedom on that fifth day. And we're looking forward to seeing what that looks like. It'll be for competitions, job shadowing, college visits, however those students would like to use that time. So it's a change in the school calendar, which is shaking things up a little bit and looking forward to seeing how that goes for our students. I'm going to combine just for a moment a little bit of legislative with Butler Tech. As a part of our Capitol Conference experience, the legislative team from Butler Tech visited with some of our legislators last week. We visited with Candace Keller, with George Lang, and with Senator Steve Wilson, and had several discussions around the same topics. We talked about the report card as an accountability measure and some things we'd like to see changed in it. We thank them for their help in the previous capital budget. There's a bioscience, you might see it from the highway, you can see the addition going on to the back of the building. That will be expanding our bioscience building, and thank them for their support of that project. That's scheduled to open in August of 2020. We also provided a packet on current events, and then we talked about two pieces that are an issue for us with Butler Tech right now. There's a system called transferology, which is used between higher education, college to say what happens with your credits and where will you get the most credit and how does that apply to future career roles. And we don't have anything like that for high school to college. And so when we look at College Credit Plus, which is intended to help our students and our families, we don't have any way for a student to say, if I took these classes in high school, I can look at Miami and they'll give me credit here. I can look at Sinclair, it'll give me credit here. And so Butler Tech would like to pilot a program that would actually build that for high school to college to help students and families be able to use College Credit Plus in a really more meaningful way rather than just saying, I took some extra classes. So we had a request to do a pilot project for that, and we'll see if we get support for it or not. And then the final piece that we talked about was ODE is looking to implement what are called WebZams, and they're postponing it for 1 year, but we expect it to be in all the different sectors. So they're starting with welding, and our students already currently go through credentialing, business-accepted credentialing. This is a stunning number. It would be another 180 hours of testing, and it doesn't provide credentialing or anything. So we've asked for that to stop. It's stunning when you think about it. So we've asked for that to stop. That's not beneficial, and it doesn't provide our students with any more experience or any more benefit than what we're already doing. So those were our legislative conversations, and those faces when they heard 180 hours were about the same as all of you, too. So it was good discussion. That's it for my Butler Tech report.
Thank you. Any questions for Linda? All right. Finance Business Advisory Committee?
Kelly, you want to?
Oh, I was unprepared for that. We had a finance meeting.
We did.
Last Friday. And we discussed the five-year forecast and got input. Wednesday? All right.
Last week.
Last week. All the days ran together. Last Wednesday, you're right. And we discussed the five-year forecast. That's basically what we did. That was the gist of the meeting, was explaining the five-year forecast with all the same three scenarios that we're going to discuss tonight for busing.
And we talked a little bit about facilities.
Right.
And the timeline for that, because that's going to have an impact on finances. So, yeah, we talked about that. And then just talked about the next meeting and some of those future things that we are on our agendas for future meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
That's about it. Always forget I'm on the finance committee.
Anything else on finance?
I don't have anything to add to that.
All right, moving on to legislative.
Matt?
Last week, we had a meeting with the Butler County superintendents and treasurers. We had 4 local officials that were invited, or that RSVP that they would come. Senator Cooley, Representative Keller, Representative Carruthers, talking about the Ed Choice Scholarship problems, and also the report card. So we had very heated discussions, and I think we'll get some movement there, I'm hoping. I have a BASA meeting tomorrow to address both those issues, so more to come. But that's the biggest thing going on in our world. Mrs. Logan spoke very eloquently about some of the issues with the Ed Choice scholarships.
It was a very passionate, which got a little heated conversation.
We were fine.
But I think there's a lot of common ground.
There is.
We all agreed that the way that school districts are placed on the Ed Choice Scholarship list is, I'm not going to use the word that we use, but isn't quite the right set of parameters we should be looking at.
Right.
So hopefully something will happen there.
And I'll do more in December at our board meeting to talk about the Ed Choice Scholarship, the impact, and what kind of movement. Kind of wanted to wait it because there's a lot of talk going on about it now. I think it's going to change.
I know we say this all the time, but I just think it's kind of important to always mention the fact that the two of you being our advocates is huge. You pull a lot of weight within the state just being so good at what you do, but also having been kind of at the forefront of the funding models, but also just being really involved in BASA, OSBA, and everything like that. So thank you for keeping Lakota in mind, but more importantly, just public education as a whole and fighting for the things that we know are right, and those decisions that are being made that directly affect us, but so many other districts like Ed Choice.
Thanks.
Yeah. So thank you.
Kelly?
I don't think I have anything else. Did Jenny going to talk about where we are on the lovely House bill?
House Bill 305, we continue to have testimony in the House Finance Committee. Last week, we had testimony on distribution. This week will be on poverty, more distribution. I believe I'm set to testify first week in December on special education, gifted, and EL. So we continue to move along.
I have for the board a brief article from Howard Fleeter, who is a well-recognized school funding expert within our state, and you'll find his perspective interesting. He talks about the work that you've been doing, Jenny, and that he anticipates that there would be another lawsuit about constitutionality if a school funding formula of some sort is not implemented. So I appreciated his directness in his comments.
Thank you.
At the federal level, we are looking again at appropriations expiring as of November 21, and expect to see some kind of a continuing resolution that provides additional temporary funding at fiscal year 2019 levels. The other piece that I'd like to point out that I think would actually be an interesting topic for workshop agenda coming up is the Secret Service did a targeted report on school violence, and they looked at, and Matt, you may be aware of this already, they looked at 41 incidents between 2008 and 2017. And there was a lot of conversation with specific recommendations that came out of it. So I'd like to see us tackle that as a board and have some conversation around it. And I think that's it for our legislative report.
Yeah, I think.
And we are planning on a visit before the end of the year to Columbus, but we have not set a date for that yet. It'll be probably wrapped around Jenny's testimony time.
Maybe we can go up that day.
Would that be better suited for the safety committee or as a board workshop? What are your thoughts?
I think it could be both, but I think it'd be good to look at it just as a board to
As a
make sure
board.
we understand it.
I also had asked Matt the question, I know because I think it feeds into our transportation conversation, that there's a bill that I don't know if you have any more information on about
It's just
extending
been
the time that people hold their permit for a year instead of the current 6 months.
Yeah.
So
I
That's-
think
that
it,
is on the agenda for tomorrow,
I was
too.
going to say, I think they've just introduced that.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. So like, at the end of October is when
That's going to impact our kids, too.
So would it be, like, they would have it from 15 to 16?
15 and a half, they would have to have it for a year. Unless they turned 18, then they wouldn't have to have it for a full year, is how I read the news article
Yeah,
that
I saw that
read on
that's
it.
just very early, in the very early stages is what I saw. Is that correct, Matt?
Yes,
It's just now been introduced, so.
I believe so.
So that could have a potential impact depending on where that goes. All right. Anything else on legislative?
That's it.
Facilities?
We had a facilities meeting prior to OSBA Capital Conference, and it was a very busy meeting, a lot going on. The timeline was presented to the committee, which takes us through the spring into the summer. And I think that as a board, we should be prepared to be having lots of conversations around facilities. It's probably going to be dominating a lot of what we're going to be talking about as we continue through this process. A couple things about the meeting and then moving forward as well. First off, we have invited Betsy Fuller, PR Communications, to be a part of that ongoing committee work. We recognize the importance of the facilities plan, and we recognize the importance of the work that the board's going to be doing around that. And so we want to get out ahead of that, and we want to be making sure that we're communicating and putting information out to the community so that conclusions aren't drawn ahead of the work. And so what we want to do is really have a balance between visuals, but also the information that's being discussed at the facilities meeting, so that, again, we can just stay ahead of the conversation out there and make sure that we're being completely 100% transparent with the community. Not that we wouldn't be, but being very intentional about that throughout this process. The other thing that I would say, too, is that I had a recommendation to the committee during that time that we also reach out to both the Westchester and Liberty Township trustees to have them appoint a trustee to be a part of that ongoing committee work as well. So trying to reach out and look at how we can bring our townships into the process so that they can start wrestling with some of the very similar things that we're going to be wrestling with, and so that they have a voice at the table as well. I know that we got a response from Liberty Township,
Correct.
and we've got somebody that will be coming. I think it's Mr. Schramm.
Yes.
We have not heard back yet from Westchester Township. The other thing that we had talked about also, and we didn't make a decision, is whether or not we wanted to have a student staff voice on that facilities committee. And I think that that's something that we can still have conversations around. My only concern, it's not that we want to diminish that voice or have more voices on the committee. We also want to be a nimble committee. We don't want it to get so large that we're not able to move the work forward in the time frame that is presented to us. You all should have received the email from Jenny articulating that this coming Monday, instead of the community conversation, we're going to be doing a board work session. The reason for that is to have a discussion around ELP, which is the Expedited Local Partnership Program, which I know we've had conversations about before, but it's the matching dollars for work that we'll be doing for reimbursement. And so Jenny's
2 Mondays from
It's
now.
2
2 Mondays from now.
December 2nd.
Thank you, yes.
I
It's
panicked
2
just
Mondays
for
from
you.
now.
Having
It's,
a community
it's in my
conversation
calendar.
on Monday.
I'll show up. But,
You'll be the
but,
only
Will you, though?
I will. At that meeting, the intent is for Jenny and her team to really take a deep dive into that, be able to answer any questions that you have. So I'd recommend connecting with Jenny ahead of time if there's information that you want presented at that work session, because we will need to move forward with a vote for that program if we want to kind of keep that running parallel to the facilities work that we're doing. And again, Jenny can articulate the reasons for that as we move forward with that. I don't think we need to get into that right now.
The vote wouldn't be, is the vote on the 2nd, or would?
No.
No, the
No.
vote would be at our next.
It'd be in December.
Board meeting,
Yep.
okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so the goal was to get the work session in, take a deep dive, understand what's going on. That way in our December meeting, we could make a decision on it if we so choose to do so. Jenny, am I missing anything?
We've met with 2 educational
Yes.
Consultants.
visionaries, for lack of a better term, as part of this process as well. The board sat in on the last one, which I thought was better than the first one that we did, but
Yeah.
that's still a work in progress.
Yeah, and I think it's important to clarify on that too, because I think I was maybe more of an outspoken voice at the last board meeting about why would we spend money on that. That's actually, we have to.
Yeah.
If we're going to look at the OFCC, and getting state dollars for any future projects. So one of the requirements is that we have to work with an educational planner, consultant planner.
Yep.
And so more or less, we need to decide who would be the best fit for our team to move forward. So,
One piece of many in that process.
yes, yeah. Yep. But again, I think that that's an important reason why we should be bringing some people into the conversation on that facilities committee as we move forward and doing the deep dive at the work session. So I think just really important for the board to understand that we're going to be having a lot of conversations heading into the spring about facilities.
Yeah. And the most important piece is to make sure that everybody sitting at this table
Correct.
is up to speed and all on the same page with all the same information. So
Yeah.
it'll be a lot of information at that meeting, but
And
it's necessary.
And I know Todd, I'm assuming I speak for you, but I won't speak for you.
I wouldn't assume that.
You wouldn't assume that, but, if the board would like a certain type of communication following the facilities meetings, just let us know. If you feel like you need more documents uploaded, whatever it is that you need from us, just let us know. We can kind of tailor the conversation post-meeting so that you feel like you're being equipped as we move forward. And I know Betsy is going to be helping us with that as well. That's all I've got.
Anything else on that? Look forward to that December 2nd meeting. Okay, new business. Do we have any new business?
It looks like Mr. Coney's coming to the microphone.
He's just prepping.
Is he just prepping, or does he have something new business?
Then we'll move to administrative reports, the update on the high schools and program of studies with Mr. Coney.
No.
Now it's your turn.
All you.
2 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to come before the board for a quick preview of the program of study for 7th through 12th grade. As you know, each year we provide an update of this, and it is available for students and parents after the first of the year to help plan their courses for the next year. And this is a preview of this, and I'll be back in December to answer any questions you might have and to go in a little bit more in depth on a couple more topics. An overview of this is that our program of studies continues to evolve over time. It will be a mostly online format for this upcoming year that involves more of a planning guide that makes it more user-friendly for students and parents to plan out not only that upcoming year, but fully a 4-year program ahead of them. Another piece of that we're adding is what we're calling a 4E pathway. So as you know, in the past, we've had STEAM pathways that were engineering and biomedical. All of our new programs that we bring on board at the high schools will be part of this 4E pathway format also. So this past year, IT and cyber became a part of that. In this upcoming year, business and entrepreneurship will become a part of that. And what we will do is I've copied sort of a brief look at one of those on the second page. And so it puts together not only the core coursework that you have, but complementary coursework that we found from our business partners tells us are good courses to be taking with those that you might not always think of. And then real-world learning opportunities, which are internships and job shadows and speakers and other skills, and the college majors and career options that all align to that. It's not a strict, must go through this pathway, but for as a parent or as a student to say, I'm interested in, let's say, engineering, here are the opportunities and things I might not have thought of as I put together a 4-year plan for myself. We're excited about that as a different sort of way to help parents and students walk through this process. The new courses that we're presenting for next year, in business, we are redesigning the freshman and sophomore classes into business essentials and applications to make those more real-world, connected to business partners, mentors, opportunities like that. We're excited to be launching an incubator this year. So Incubator EDU will be our entrepreneurship program, which will launch for juniors and seniors this upcoming school year. And we'll have our parent and student information night on December 12th at 7 p.m. at Miami VOA. We're really excited for students, teams of students, to be able to design their own business solution around a challenge that they've found, work with real subject matter experts and mentors, and have a real pitch for actual seed funding for their business at the end of their junior year, which is an exciting opportunity we're really thrilled about. The other new courses that we've got at the high school, are the continued expansion of our IT and cyber program. The Cyber 2 course is what the Cyber 1 students who are in that currently will follow into. That it will basically take the place of the Cyber Sprint that we've got for our seniors going in, so there's no real additional staffing or anything needed for that, but just more students coming into the program. And our Butler Tech partnership, we are piloting with them sort of a one-of-a-kind IT and computer science pathway and capstone for our students, knowing that web design and app design and game design are always evolving. So this takes it to the next level of 2D and 3D computer design, which is, think of virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, all of that, which is all continued. There will be a freshman or a sophomore junior level class of that on campus, and then a augmented virtual reality Internet of Things capstone course also that they're working with us. We're the first ones to be kind of pushing this ground, and so it really fleshes out all of our cyber, IT, and computer science pathway for our students. It's exciting. American Sign Language is one of our programs that is just exploding at the high school. They're doing a fantastic job, and we're in the middle of a 2-year process of adding on ASL 4, which would be a real-world learning internship application-based course. But in order to do that, we need to have ASL 1 at the freshman level. And so that will start next year, and we'll continue piloting the ASL 4 until we get a full-blown group of that in 2 years who have come through that whole program. We have a few students doing that right now, kicking the tires, testing it out for us to see what that looks like to be sort of in a blended environment. We have an advanced topics in mathematics. We've talked about this class a lot. We have staffing to be able to provide this course. It will be provided for students at both East and West. It'll be one of our students or one of our teachers who's teaching that. We're excited to be able to provide this for our top math interested students who are coming through. We are also trying to build out as many electives as possible, especially in social studies, that have a wide variety of students who can apply and take those. We have a civil rights class that we are offering for this upcoming year. And in junior high school, we have Media, Design, and Communications 2. We started that 2 years ago. And now we have students who are saying, I took it as a 7th grader. I love doing this. I want to do this in my future. Is there a way for me to take the next version of this? And we're able to do that also. So the vast majority of these are for no additional staffing. They're just additional electives and ways of offering our courses. So thank you for the time today. I'll be back in December to kind of go in more in depth with this, and I'll have the online version of our program of studies for you to review at that time also. Good?
Do we have questions?
Questions?
Kind of want to go back to high school.
I know,
Again, the same thing.
I have one question. I know in Capitol Conference, one of the sessions Kelly and I attended was about the Six Sigma Green Belt being an opportunity to get credentials, and that would help with our Prepared for Success report card metric.
Absolutely.
And I see that you have that on here as something that you're looking at.
Right. And I don't know if we're talking with other schools, and some schools do it as a discrete class, and some schools do it as more of a sprint class or a certification embedded within another class. So as we look at our business program, that's one of the things that our business partners have come back with and said, how do we embed that in there, or is that something that's separate? Is it a club? So I think that's part of the design work we're doing with them to see what that looks like as we go through that. Yeah, but that's absolutely, anytime that we can get those certifications, they're good for students, and they're also get those industry credentials.
Right.
That's important.
That was a really interesting session on some of the schools that are doing it.
And then I had another question. I know we had gotten some requests for like an AP music theory or something along that line. Is that something you've explored or considering?
Sure, I bet we probably had 15, 17 different course proposals this year, and the way that we're looking at them is kind of 3 buckets. One is a new course, one is a redesign course, and one is more of a how do we include different skills within a course that we already teach. And I think that fell into that bucket also. I think we have some other interests in music that we had a lot of different proposals that came in, and I don't think it was fair to choose one of those at this time. I think we have to look at a broader scope of that. I know Matt and I have had conversations about music in the district. Yeah. So I think that's in the mix. It won't be for next year, but we give feedback to the teachers who propose those each time.
Okay.
I was going to make the comment because you had made the comment about the Pledge of Allegiance earlier. We do the Pledge.
I know.
We also
People
do
think we
financial
don't.
literacy.
Right.
I know that's something that comes up quite frequently. That do we teach that in our schools? We do personal financial literacy.
Yes. Yes, and it's embedded, it's my understanding, within the government classes as well, or the economics classes.
Correct.
Yes.
Government, economics, and then the 2 business classes also.
Right.
All count for that.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank
Very
you.
much. Thanks.
And with that, we move to the 5-year forecast and transportation conversation.
Okay, so for some of you, this might feel like we're a month late with our 5-year forecast, but the law changed, and this is the first year where we're actually presenting the forecast in November versus October. So the purpose of the forecast is to provide history. So on the five-year forecast document, you're going to see 3 years of actual. So we've got 2017 through 2019 as actual, and then we're forecasting 5 years. And the first year of that forecast is the current year, 2020. And we now are going through 2024. Seems like a long time away, but it's really not. We do utilize this document. I know a lot of people say, why do we have to do a 5-year forecast? It's ridiculous. We can't forecast what's going to happen in 2 biennium budgets. While that's true, it's still a document, it's still a tool that we can utilize for management purposes so that we can do things like, hey, let's forecast what it would look like if we put in 9th grade transportation or 9 through 12 transportation. So we do use the document for management decision making. It is a snapshot financial report. It's based on the information we have as of today. And we might know something different tomorrow. So as the assumptions change, the numbers will change. And like I mentioned, it is a legal requirement. We have to submit the 5-year forecast twice a year in November and May of each year. So revenue. So on the 5-year forecast, we have revenue line items. Our largest revenue line item is going to be our real estate tax income. And the second bullet on this sheet talks about how in tax year 2020, Butler County will go through a complete reappraisal. We went through an update and in 2017, and the increases during that time for residential and agricultural was 8.7%, and commercial industrial was 2.5%. So we're estimating a 5% increase across the board for our values. State funding is our second largest revenue for the district. This year, our state funding is flatlined. So our foundation dollars that we get from the state is what we got last year. We did get additional revenue that's called student wellness and success dollars that are restricted dollars that have to be spent on wraparound services. We have to have a plan for the district with a partner on how we're going to spend those dollars. It's a needed thing, but it's restricted and it doesn't even show up on the forecast. So those dollars have to be set aside in a different fund, and so they're not even shown here.
Jenny, can you explain what wraparound services means for those who are watching?
Sure. So wraparound services, so the student wellness and success dollars are to be spent on the mental health of our students, social and emotional type of services for our students. So we might partner with an outside agency to help us with those type of needs for our students. The last bullet on this page is something that I thought was worthy of mentioning. In 2013, we passed our last levy, a 5.5 mil combined levy. 3.5 was operating, and then 2 mils was for a PI, a Permanent Improvement Fund. Since that time, our effective mills, so what we collect from our homeowners, our taxpayers in our community, the millage, the effective millage, has been reduced back down to it's less than what it was before we passed that last levy. So for some of our residents who might say, well, my tax bill went up. Well, if your tax bill went up, it's because your home value went up, or there was another levy that was placed on that was not the school district's. So I thought it was worth mentioning. And the reason why that happens is because the value, we're lucky to live in this area where the value of our community is increasing. It's a great thing. So as that value increases, those millage rates are rolled back so that we effectively collect the same amount. That's way simpler than what it is, but. So here's two graphs just to show both townships, Westchester and Liberty, and since 2012 to 2018, what those millage amounts are, as well as the percent of your tax bill that goes to the school district. So again, in 2012, the effective tax rate for Lakota was 38.69, and what it's being collected on currently is 38.41. And I'll mention that as we continue, that millage rate is going to continue to be rolled back and continue to drop. This chart goes back to 2010. I think it's important to show not just what's on our 5-year forecast for history, but to go back to 2010 because that's kind of right around the time when we started to see some we had some dark times around here. So I think it's good to reflect back and to look and see where we were and how far we've come. The other thing I want to mention too is if you look out towards 2022, 23, and 24, I believe we're being conservative in our revenue increases. We're estimating 1% increase in 23 and 24. So we're not estimating more than what we believe. I don't believe we're being overly conservative, but I do believe we're being conservative. Expenditure assumptions. For 2020, what's good about doing the forecast in November is we have our staff employed, and so we pretty much know what that estimate is going to look like for staff. This year, we did move preschool administration and some related services that were employed at the Butler County Educational Service Center as contracted services. We now have them employed as our employees, which is increasing our wages and benefits, but then decreasing our purchase services line item. Our union contracts expire at the end of fiscal year 21. We are assuming a 3.35% for 21 and a 3% moving beyond those dates. And just as a reminder, the base for LEA is 3.25 with a 1.97% COLA, and for LSSA, 2.5% and a 1% COLA. The reason why I'm assuming a 3.35% is because you can't just add the two together and say that's going to be the increase in total wages, because we have approximately, and I'm looking at Rob Kramer, approximately 60 employees who leave us, whether it be resignation or retire. And when those folks leave us and we employ people to take their place, there's a savings there. And when you look at that traditionally, it's about a 2% increase from those people who exit and the new people coming in. Healthcare rates are held through 2021. You might recall we got a 1% decrease, and then we're holding that through 2021. In 2022, we're projecting a 5% and then 7.5% beyond that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is we've done some things around safety and security. We've made some more investments in that area. And so our budget is now reflecting a $1.1 million additional investment for additional SROs and upgrades in security cameras, phone systems, and barricades. And here's the graph for expenditures from back to 2010. So the average for our expenditure growth moving forward is about 3%. A little bit more than that, but about 3%. So here is the chart that puts it all together, our revenue, our expenditures, and our cash balance. And you'll see the green line is our cash. And you'll notice that it does start to dip down in 2023 and 24. That is because a spending deficit is predicted. And the spending deficit, if you are looking at the 5-year forecast, it is on line 6010. And that means our expenditures, the red bar is higher than the blue bar, which is revenues. One of the things that I think is wonderful, though, is that we are predicting 10 years before spending deficit occurs, which for this...
From the
10
last
years
levy.
From the last,
Not from
so
now.
in 2013.
Not from now. Okay, that
Not
was my
from now. 2013 is when we started balancing our budget. So if you go 2013 out to 2023, so that's, I
10 years.
think that's a
That's really
good
good.
thing to mention.
Right.
We did pass a policy, one of our policies that we adopted last June was a balanced budget policy, which says our recurring revenues and our recurring expenses, that it's our goal that we will have a balanced budget. Luckily, we have some time to decide what we're going to do about that, and to also dig into it and say, what are our recurring revenues and our recurring expenses? So it is nice that we have some time. And it's one of the things that I hope that we can talk about and hear from our community at our community conversation coming up. At the end of 2024, we still have 6.5 months of cash balance sitting there. But as we know, once you start into deficit spending, if you don't have a plan, you just keep spending and the money runs out. So, again, we have some time to figure out where we're going, what we should do. Transportation. If you haven't heard, we've been talking about high school transportation. We have a couple options that we have been considering. The first option is 9th grade only. The second option is 9 through 12. The first option on the forecast is it ranges from 2.8 million to 3 million during that time. The spending deficit would come a year earlier, and it would be 1.3 million in 22, 5.1 in 23, and 9.3 in 24. If we went with option 2, which is all high school, it ranges from 4.8 to 5.2 million, and the spending deficit appears 2 years earlier. So you would be looking at about 600,000 in 21, 3.3 in 22, 7 in 23, and over 11 in 24. So in summary, we have operated with a balanced budget for 7 years, and we are predicting that we would continue that until 23. We've talked about the facilities. When we talk about our finances, I already mentioned that the new monies we're getting from the state foundation aren't on here. Neither are facilities and PI. So as we continue that discussion with our master plan, we need to talk about all finances. It all needs to be part of the conversation. And then lastly, a unified financial strategy should be prioritized.
No,
No, go ahead, jump in.
but that's one of the things that we heard, both of us heard from Moody's and from S&P, trying to get that higher bond rating was that point. I'm guessing that's where that came from.
Yeah. And just tonight, I mean, we hear that this is a small amount, we should be doing it. This is too much, you shouldn't be doing it. So we look at things and we see things differently. Even us sitting up at this table, we see things differently. But the more we have conversations about this, the more we engage our community, the better off we're going to be. We don't need additional monies tomorrow or next year or the year after for operating. But one of these days, you might. So it's better to engage your community and discuss what do we believe about our finances. I talked about effective millage. What do we believe about that? Do we believe that we just continue to let the effective mills roll down, or is there a point where we believe that that's living in this community, that's what it should be? Just lots of conversations that I think will open it up, and I believe there's way more common ground here than there isn't. So that's it. Questions?
I've asked the question of Matt of what has been the impact on absenteeism and attrition,
Transportation.
if we've had their dropout rate increase at all because of the transportation issue.
It's been minimal. I mean, there's been a couple instances at the schools, but it's not been that big of an impact. So I would say minimal, but it's a good question.
Other questions?
The only thing I wanted to just go back to, you talked about this is typical conservatism for you, if you're conservative?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is like your usual? I mean, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Jenny's very conservative usually.
I believe that the way to forecast is you want to be conservative, not overly conservative, based on the information that you have. But I will say on expenditures, for example, there's no additional staff built into this forecast.
Right.
I don't believe that the assumptions we're making about health care are too conservative. So we're trying to be as realistic as we can, but with a conservative flair, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
I have the 2015 forecast in my book, just of what you had done back then. And like if you look at our actual revenues for 2019, which is where the extent of which it went out, we had projected revenues of 165 million and they're 180. So I think that speaks to the conservative nature of the forecast. And our expenditures are $200,000, $250,000 less than what you had projected, which is interesting.
It's pretty close.
Right?
Yeah.
Another question I had for Chris was the the forecast for how many bus routes they put together for the high school and how those looked at the ridership. If we were assuming, you know, the 40 to 60 kids that fit on a bus when we did that routing, and he said no, that they had assumed 120 to 150 students per bus, knowing that there are many students who would not be using the transportation. So those assumptions were built into the forecast, and I asked if we found, if those turned out to be even less, if we could readjust the routes once they were set up. And he said we could to some extent, but they would have already, the routes would have been bid on and set up, but we would reutilize people for other things if we were able to consolidate. So that was another question.
Is that for 10, 12, 9, 12?
Right, because I think the ridership assumption is higher for
Higher,
the ninth
right,
grade than if
obviously,
we
yeah.
had done the entire high school.
Right.
Other questions, comments, conversation?
If we
Well-
could, sorry, Todd, go ahead.
I don't know if it's conservative or not. I'm not totally on board with some of the assumptions you have listed in here, but the transportation issue is the crux of this thing, and the three different things I'm looking at here. And I agree with Mr. York that it's a shame a district like this does not have at least freshman busing. And I came in here ready to support that. Seeing it in the context of the 5-year forecast, however, I agree with, is it Mrs. Short, that this does seem rushed, and we're looking at a $9.3 million deficit in 2024, which may be fiction. It may be high, it may be low. We don't know. You mentioned we have to have a plan, and we have to consider the impact of the facilities plan. Well, we don't have a plan. We were going to reallocate, that was the word that was used to me, funds to pay for transportation. This, as you can see from the cash balance, we're burning up cash, and it starts to go down, as you mentioned. It's not the same percent every year, it's exponential.
Correct.
That $100 and something million we have in cash reserve, in my mind, and in a lot of discussions, has been spent 3 times over, and I'm concerned about the lack of a plan, and I feel like this might be a little bit rushed. That's where I am on this.
Do you want to tell me which assumptions, though, you'd like for me to look at a little bit closer?
Well, I would like you to look, I want to see something about facilities, but obviously we can't do that in
Can't
time
do
for
that
your
now.
thing.
I can't put that in there.
But I need a better understanding of the union contract cost.
Okay.
Because, if I'm not mistaken, wage increases and whatnot are built into the plan for people who have been here longer. They go up every year. Are we looking at the whole thing goes up across the board? Is that what this assumption is?
So, yes. So the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, is that increment increase that every employee gets unless they're at the top of the schedule. So if they're already at 30, then that COLA is not there for them.
Okay.
So, Jenny, I have a few
Yes.
questions as well. You mentioned recurring and non-recurring revenues and expenditures before, so perhaps you can spell that out a little bit more with a definition and some examples,
Sure.
because I think that's relevant to our discussion.
So, so an example of recurring expenditures definitely would be salaries and benefits.
And transportation?
Transportation would be at the state required transportation amounts. So as we look in each one of these, and each one of the line items, we would look at what is going to be recurring, what would you have options on. For example, instructional expenses. we might look at that and say 75% of that is going to be a recurring expense, and maybe 25% would be additional wants. But 75% of that is going to be based on absolute need. But it's going to be taking a look at each one of those and diving into them. Your tax revenue, that's going to be a reoccurring revenue. State, but maybe not 100%. Maybe we might want to look at a percentage there too, so.
So recurring is something that there's some degree of predictability to it, both revenue and expenditure. And non-recurring would be something that's unusual.
Yeah, like for example, capital expense. If we would want to do an addition to this building, that would be a one-time capital expense that's not going to be on there as recurring.
So I agree with many of the points that Mr. Parnell has indicated, and part of what my concern is about goes back to the policy we just passed in June, which was the structurally balanced budget policy 6219. And it does spell out in there recurring, non-recurring, and how the reserves are to be used as well. And I want to read one part out loud. The district shall endeavor to adopt a structurally balanced budget. Generally, this means that recurring expenditures should be covered by recurring revenues. Non-recurring revenues should be used to fund non-recurring expenditures. When we're looking at a deficit in our spending forecast already, I'm very, very concerned that we are dipping into reserves that should be used for things like the $206 million permanent improvement plan that we've got in front of us to look at, the facilities plan.
Do we have, am I the only one that hasn't seen that? Do we have a plan?
So it's in the book. It's a
We have-
matter of adding up the preliminary facilities plan that we received. It's actually $206,995,000. I'm not quite sure what that renovation factor was, and still looking for an answer on that. But if we apply that to it, then it's actually reduced to $198 million. But those are the potential liabilities in front of us until we make a
Where's
determination.
that money? Like, we have had no
I would
conversations
say, I've had no
whatsoever.
discussion about that.
Like,
It's in
we
the
could-
book, we've not added anything up, we've
So
not
if I could
voted on.
finish?
It's in the facilities.
It's in the
planning.
facilities plan,
we
and
haven't-
those are the pieces that are the potential liability that we have for our facilities. We don't know yet, and that's exactly the point. We don't know how much we'll be taking out of that and actually applying. But it's a concern, and again, we're piecemealing.
So it could be 20 million,
I do believe,
could be 15 million. It may not be the 206 million. I just want to be very careful about the numbers that we're throwing out because I believe that it induces fear. We haven't had any discussions. We have not. We are at the beginning phases of the facility committee. That's why we're having the conversations. We may get through the committee and say this isn't an investment that we want to make as a district, as a board. I just want to be
I
very
agree
careful.
with you that we may end up there, Brad, but the point is, it's an unknown at this point. And so we're looking at.
And I agree with you. I just don't think we should be throwing out numbers because we don't know. It could
I'd be more
400
than
million.
happy to listen to your concerns if I could finish.
Okay.
Thank you. I do believe that we've seen a demonstrated need for freshman busing, at least, but I am very concerned about where that money is going to come from unless it's a reallocation. If it's new dollars, I have grave concern about that. I think we have other potential issues in front of us, including the facilities plan, that are going to require far more assets than we even have in front of us. So are we talking reallocation or new dollars? And I'm actually posing that question to the entire board.
I don't think we know.
Well, I think it depends how you look at it and how you're reallocating the dollars, because we did have, wasn't it a $2.2 million savings in the prior contract? And it's my understanding, we were estimating that we'll get an additional $400,000 from changes to the transportation formula, because there's been an outcry that transportation needs to be added back into the formula.
Well, I have assumed in 2022, which is when this biennium is up, that we would start receiving some sort of transportation reimbursement back for those additional students. And I've assumed the way that they funded us in the previous biennium, which I believe is conservative. So
You
that's
used
where the
that for
400.
the assumption in here.
Yes. Mhm.
And as far as the savings on a previous contract, we gotta look at the deficit spending. The savings isn't real money.
Right.
You
And
sound
it's
like
already in there.
AOC all of a sudden. I mean, it's not real. So, I don't think that's a factor. That you can't reallocate money that's not there, just because you saved it somewhere in the past.
It's how we're looking at our comprehensive transportation costs, in my opinion.
I completely agree, and I look forward to having conversations as a board about how we're going to start to reallocate some funds to decrease that deficit spending. I think that's a responsibility that we have, and I believe that we have all articulated that through the course of the time that I've been on the board, that none of us have any desire to have to immediately go back to the community for additional revenue. I think that we need to always be keeping an eye on what are the new expenses that are coming and what are the things that maybe we need to be reevaluating to find those funds. So I completely agree with that. And I actually, I think I mentioned that last year when we were doing the 5-year forecast, to look forward to those conversations as we headed into the May 5-year forecast. And again, to really look at where can we save some money when it comes to reallocation. When it comes to transportation, I have a couple feelings. One is that, and I caution what I'm going to say because this is an extremely difficult job being up here and making these decisions. It's 50-50. Half the people are going to hate you, half the people are going to love you, right?
Right.
And that's the reality that we all face. Todd's hearing from a bunch of people one direction. I'm hearing from a whole bunch of different people the other direction because we live in echo chambers. That's really. We try our best to get out. We try our best to hear from people to understand what people want. But the reality is we hear from our people that we know. And they're telling us a certain thing. And so what I'm saying is that when busing was cut with the previous board, I don't want to cast judgment on that board because I didn't exist on it. However, I would have never cut busing for 9th grade. I would have never made that vote because I believe that it is so important to our 9th graders that we have intentionally placed in a separate building. And I believe that we have significant populations in our community that have 2 working parent families, and a quarter of our population lives in poverty. It is a real barrier to access education that I don't live necessarily in how those families live every single day. And so I think that for me, it's a priority that as a board that we need to make, and we need to figure out how do we reallocate funds to pay for that. And I get maybe it's the cart before the horse. However, with my other comment I was going to make is that we've been talking about transportation forever. It was being talked about before I got on the board. When I was running for the board, Todd and I were having conversations at the table about bringing back busing. We've gotten 2 different cost structures from Chris in the time I've been on the board. So when statements are being made that this is being rushed, we shouldn't do this, we haven't had.
Panel, ton of conversation.
We never discussed how to pay for it. And I've heard both sides, to be honest with you. And quite frankly, my daughter was a freshman last year. My son will be a freshman in 2 years. I lived that last year. And when you have a dismissal time at 2:30 in the afternoon,
20.
it is a hardship. There's no question
Right.
about it. And like I said, I was all for at least freshman busing until I saw the forecast. And I realized we don't have a financial plan.
And you have the flexibility in your schedule to be able to make those dismissal times work, right? Somewhat. You have some flexibility, or you have a
Difficult.
network. If you're a transient family, or you are working an hourly job, those realities are way more difficult, just extremely difficult. And so I get it. I've said this for the past few meetings, so I'm going to stop talking now. You know how I feel about this. But I am 100% on board with this board to start talking about what we can do and what plans we can put in place to reallocate funds to make this happen.
I think I have a tremendous amount of faith that as a board and a treasurer that's been treasurer of the year, that we can sit down and figure this out. And like Jenny said, we have the luxury of it's not going to happen tomorrow. But I, like Brad, think that we've been putting this off, and there are really some families out there that this is a struggle, and we hear it all the time. That's just,
So I'm going to throw something out. The freshman only, the spending deficit comes back a year earlier by $1.3 million. I know when we have looked at the past 3 years at least, when we look at what did we expect, where did we end up, we ended up at least $1 million better than where we expected to be.
Okay.
I'm going to throw out there, if the board would say to Matt and I want you to do something about the financial situation. We don't want to see a spending deficit a year earlier. You could say that to us, if that would make you feel more comfortable. And in a budget as large as this, $1.3 million in that year, we have time to plan for that, and we could do that. You could say that to us.
And I'm sure we will, and I agree, I'm sure you can.
Yes.
I did want to point out one other thing, though, that you just reminded me of, is even without additional transportation, we still have a $7.5 million deficit
Correct.
in
Yes.
2024. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct. That's,
Baseline.
yes, that's the estimate, yes.
With $120 million
So it's
in
not
cash
just,
reserves.
it's not just transportation, there's a lot of issues.
Which is all those conversations that I think we need to have. You know, one of the things that I think that we need to estimate, and I've done some of this, is trying to look at how long would the cash last?
right?
You know, I know we're still predicted to have about $100 million there, but how long would it last if the expenses continued to rise at about 3% and your revenue continues to rise less than 1%? How long would it take before the money runs out? I
And
think
it's
that's-
not a structurally balanced budget at that point.
Right, if we
So
just
we aren't
assumed,
following our own policy even.
but Linda,
But it's,
well, I think it's worthy of saying, worst case scenario, if we do nothing and revenues lag so far behind, it's less than 1%, and expenditures continue on about a 3% increase, how far could we go? So I think that's one of those things that we need to look at. It needs to be part of our conversation. Another piece that we need to talk about is, which we're going to start talking about, is a debt policy. As we start getting into our facilities and the facilities conversation, do you feel good about taking a whole lot of your operating cash and putting it towards your facilities? Because I will tell you, that was one of your issues prior, is you did not have a PI fund and you were spending about $4 million out of your general operations for facilities. So
we can't.
got to have that right balance. There's a whole lot of things that we need to decide that are before us. But on this topic, and this topic alone, for transportation, I'm throwing that out there to you as far as the spending deficit a year earlier.
Another thing in this budget, we're transferring money to our rainy day fund
Correct.
as well, which we're setting at 15% versus, is my the state is 8 or
7.5, I
7.5.
believe, is what the state.
So we have twice as much in our, we will have twice as much in our rainy day fund within this budget as well. So that's another piece that's built in.
So to clarify what you said, reallocation and moving the spending deficit back another year so that it does not occur a year earlier. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So we could have freshman busing and not have the deficit
in
any earlier than it was
2022.
Would be with base.
with base.
I'm saying to take out the spending deficit in 2022.
Right. So we would be looking at the,
0.3.
yeah, base.
And another thing, for transportation, right now, we do provide an activities bus for kids between buildings as well as to the Boys and Girls Club.
We do.
And the Edge Teen Center.
We do.
And so if we were to do freshmen, they would still be able to continue to access that service potentially. Yeah.
That's what I was looking, I thought so. That's what I want the answer to be. I mean, to all this, to anything that we're doing, there's an educational cost, and there's a financial cost. And we've got to figure out what that fine line is. I mean, if we wanted to go everything on the cheap, we could, but I don't think that's what our community wants, and I don't think that's what we want for kids.
Right.
But I say that not rushed or lightly, that there is a financial cost to all this as well. So we get that. So if you're telling me we can work that 1.3 out, we'll work that 1.3 out.
And
I think you probably can, and I will trust that you can do that. However, we don't want to institute things for the community that we're going to have to turn around and take back again in 3 years.
Amen.
Absolutely.
I don't like giving something to kids and then take it back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not fair to families if we do that.
But I think what I've heard in a fairly broad spectrum, regardless of where people fall politically, is that this is an investment that people in our community want to make in our students in our schools, and they feel like it's a pain point for families, it's a pain point for businesses around our schools who can't get their people to the business because of the transportation or the traffic backups and everything that's happening.
And it's not going to be perfect either, right? I mean, it's 9th grade, but if that's what we're talking about, it's not 10, 11, 12.
Right.
I mean, so it's still going to be it's still going to come up.
I think that's the biggest pain point.
It is.
the
If you had to
ninth grade level.
triage it, sure.
That is the biggest pain,
Right.
that's, yeah. Because like Todd said, it's 2:20 in the afternoon. And there's more of an opportunity for carpooling once you get to the main building.
It just, yeah. It's better than what we have now.
Right.
It would be better. It's just not perfect.
Any other conversation? Any other questions, thoughts, anyone wants to share?
Yeah.
All right,
If it's reallocation of existing dollars and moving it back, I can support that.
so, all set, Jenny, anything else you want to share?
So I want to
Recapture
make
this.
sure.
Yes.
So what we're talking about is option 1, transportation. And we would be taking in fiscal '22, basically what we're saying is we would, 6010, we'd move it to 0 and not a negative. So we're not saying that we're wanting to reallocate the total amount, but we're reallocating enough so that the spending deficit does not show up in
Until-
fiscal year '22.
That's how I understand it.
So you're still adding to the existing spending deficit.
Correct. I'm saying we would take
You take a
$1.347 million
Out.
out.
So that it would look like it did in,
May.
It'd be 0.
It'll be 0.
But we're also saying that we're going to put together a plan to really tackle the rest of the deficit spending
Right.
into the 5-year forecast. And so that's going to be broader conversations about rainy day, cash balance, about revenues, expenditures, all of that. We're going to be having conversations.
in hopes of, in hopes that you can get it'd be 0 in year 5 as well. That's the conversation we want to have. We're not doing that right now. I understand that.
Right, we're not
No,
prepared.
we're
You're
not.
not.
We're not doing that.
We're not doing that right today.
Any further discussion?
No, if the board's committed to that, tackling the spending deficit, I'm good with that. I'm happy to hear it.
All right. We'll
Committed
move
to
to
having conversations about it.
treasurer's recommendations, A through C. We have approval of board minutes.
Can we keep C separate, please?
Certainly. Treasurer's recommendations, A and B, approval of board minutes and approval of monthly board reports. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Discussion? Jenny, please call the roll.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. We have treasurer's recommendation C, approval of the 5-year forecast. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Just to clarify,
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have a question?
we're
we have to
approving the
approve?
5-year
I mean, 'cause
forecast
they're gonna-
with transportation A, or option 1?
That's true. I'm sorry, because we have the transportation approval down below.
Yep.
So,
So the 5-year forecast,
Are we approving base?
I would,
No.
okay. So
Do the
let's back up.
transportation first.
What the law says is we have to file a 5-year forecast by the end of this month. I ask for you all to approve this, so this isn't just Jenny Logan Treasurer filing some fictitious numbers. It's the district's forecast. What we can approve the base, which doesn't have the transportation in it, and then you do
Approve.
whatever you feel like you need to do on the motion for the transportation. And then we can file this, and I can change it, and then file it again. I can bring you the one at the
Can-
next meeting, and we can
Well,
file it
okay,
again,
yeah.
meet the deadline.
Are you, do you?
Or you can do.
Can I
option
ask a
one.
question? This sounds stupid. I apologize. Are we voting to approve everything you've put in here, or are we just voting that you did it? Because somewhere I heard that we aren't legally required to vote that we agree. We are legally required to vote that Jenny did the forecast and the numbers that she put in there we believe to be accurate. I'm just a little
You're
confused.
basically voting to say, yes, this reflects the forecast of the district, and file it.
Well, I mean, if that's the case,
And
then
that the assumptions are,
Right, but
It's
we
not,
talked about the 1.347. We have till the end of the year. I think we should shelve this
Till the
and
end of
vote on it
November.
at the next meeting as far as the
end of the year
forecast
for
goes.
what?
End of the
we
month.
have to,
Oh, it's
No,
end of the
by
month.
end of the month.
it's end of November.
In
for the
November.
forecast.
Yep.
And this is all we have in November, is this meeting.
Okay, well, there's a motion on the floor. All right.
So,
I would say since we're voting, so that got loud, since we're voting just that the numbers are accurate and your team did this accurately, I would say we just vote for the transportation included in it.
so modify the motion to approve the 5-year forecast with option 1, transportation.
That would be my recommendation.
You made the motion?
It's still not going to be correct, but
well, the agenda says approval of 5-year forecast, and there were 3 options there under that. So you didn't really say in the motion which 5-year forecast you were selecting.
Would
How would you recommend we modify the motion to effectively vote on?
So
5-year forecast,
here's
option 1,
what I would
transportation?
recommend. Someone make a motion to amend the motion by adding base option 1 or option 2. And then we will vote on the amendment.
And make the
And then you
motion.
can vote on the amended motion.
I make a motion
Sorry,
to
but-
amend the motion
Oh, that's good. You're getting it right. You're getting it
to
right.
include option 1,
You just made a motion. Okay.
Okay,
to
so
amend the motion,
Made a motion to amend
the motion.
to include option 1,
Which is freshman busing.
which
Yes.
is freshman busing only.
Got it.
Thank you.
So do we have to still vote on the first motion?
No.
So I
No.
need a second on the amendment to the motion to add option 1, approval of 5-year forecast option 1.
I'll second it, I think. Sure what I'm.
So is it a separate motion, Jenny?
So now what you need to do is you need to vote on the amendment. So you need to approve the amendment.
Motion to amend.
Yes.
Oh, just to
Jenny,
amend it.
will you please call the roll on approving the amendment to the original motion?
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell? Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. Now do we have approval for the amended motion?
Right, the motion as amended, which is approval of the 5-year forecast, option 1.
And Jenny, will you please call the roll?
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Certainly.
So does there need to be a separate motion then that talks about moving the deficit back?
You
Because that will
can-
not be noted in the
You
minutes
can make
otherwise.
that motion after we vote on this. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay,
Would you like that
Mr.
motion before, or does this motion have to?
Oh, no,
do we
let's
have
just
to
get
vote?
through this
Yes,
one.
Okay,
let's
all
get
right,
through this
all right.
Mr. Lovell?
I was reading what you were saying. Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
No.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, would we like to make another
Go
motion?
ahead, Linda.
I make the motion that the deficit is, reallocation of dollars occur so that the deficit spending is moved back 1 year, and that the board commit to dealing with the spending deficit in a short order.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. Apologize for the
Oh, it's
clumsiness of all
part
of
of the
that.
work. It's part of the work.
All right.
Do you have anything else, Mrs. Logan?
No, no, I do not, Mr. Miller.
Now, for superintendent's recommendations, I'm going to break out A, which is approve transportation changes to add freshman busing. Do I have a motion to?
We already
Do we
done
need
that.
to do that?
We need to, we
Think
just
we
vote
need
on
that
that?
We're done.
separate? You
We
think
need
we're
a
good
separate
with the?
vote on the transportation, yes.
You do think, yeah,
We do need a separate vote?
yes.
Yes,
we
because you just approved the 5-year
not a-
forecast with.
Gotcha.
Oh.
Okay, great.
So, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Motion for option 1, right?
Yeah.
Option 1, ninth
That
grade,
would, okay, are we approving?
Freshman.
freshman only. That's option 1.
Further discussion? Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. Would anyone with transportation changes, we did have option 2. Is there any interest in having a motion for 10 through 12 busing? Seeing no one, we'll move to personnel items. Superintendent's recommendations B through E. We have personnel, 5-year lease for a telephone system, field trips, and donations. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. This brings us to our second opportunity for public comment. I have 2 people who are still signed up from the first time, so we will start with them. Jeremiah York.
Jeremiah York, 9515 Woodland Hills Drive, Westchester, 45011. While listening to your guys' discussion, a couple things stood out to me. First, while discussing spending deficit, I heard the phrase additional money, but I didn't hear spending cuts. You must know what you're going to reallocate before you can take on new spending. So please do that so you guys know exactly what you'll be reallocating so you can add the services that are needed. I'm a fiscal conservative, and I will oppose every school levy as long as I live. I'm also a capitalist, not a socialist. Government should not force us to pay for the education of children who are not our own. Who here is a constitutionalist? Since we have the God-given right to life, we also have the right to self-defense. It's very simple. Since the federal government passed the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1995, Columbine and every active school shooter has followed. Why? Because lawful gun owners like myself are denied our rights on school property. If a madman shoots up the place, I'm supposed to be an equal opportunity victim. Gun-free zones are the perfect target because they're unarmed. Teachers never thought they'd be risking their lives every day. If they're denied the right to defend themselves, what's the alternative? Fortify the schools until they resemble a maximum security state penitentiary? What's next? A chain link fence and barbed wire and guard tower? Is that less intimidating than a first responder with a concealed handgun? Teachers have the constitutional right to carry, but it will take a majority vote of constitutionalists on the school board for that to happen, and it will. As a social conservative, I don't like seeing the homosexual agenda shoved in my face while Christians are treated like second-class citizens. This transgender bathroom policy is a holdover from the Obama era, but this is not California, Chicago, or New York City. This is Westchester, part of the reddest county in Ohio, and we voted for Trump. Heaven forbid that policy would be imposed on the will of the vast majority. I love Christ and my country, so I hate Common Core. The globalist, socialist, communist, secularist, and Islamic agenda is blatantly obvious. Government schools are becoming re-education camps. Our children are being indoctrinated with anti-Christian and anti-American worldviews. I'd like to know what you're going to do to stop it and what you're willing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second person that we have signed up is Jenna.
Hello, my name is Jenna Michael. I live at 5994 Dantwood Lane, Liberty Township, 45044. Two of my children attend a Lakota school, one early childhood and one elementary school. In the last couple weeks, we've had some incidences at my daughter's school regarding being shoved into a wall and breaking 2 bones in her wrist. I have tried to go up the chain of who to talk to, the people at the school. The teachers have been fantastic. However, I'm getting nowhere with what I feel that needs to be accomplished in the situation. The child who, has done that has a repeated history. I've reached out to parents. There are 3 girls total at this moment that I have made contact with about their daughter's injuries and have shared my daughter's injuries, hers being the worst. I feel that I have asked Van Gordon and the district office to provide me the policies, the procedures, the parameters that are being set in place to protect all the kids, not just those that are being forceful with other students. I have gotten nowhere with that in getting those answers. I want my daughter to feel safe going to school. She's been uprooted from her classroom to a totally different classroom to avoid this child. This is the second incident in 8 months that we've had, and I just feel like my words are not being heard. She's only been in a cast for 2 weeks now. It has affected her in multiple realms: athletics, academically, socially, at home with me and my husband, organizing and trying to get to appointments. And I just ask that you maybe ask questions, go to the school, hold those people accountable in looking at the policies for bullying or that kind of thing. I looked up the code of conduct today in our meeting at district office and referencing zero tolerance policy. I don't really feel like that is being enforced. I know each child is, there's no common ground. Every child is different, and there are other educational supports and IEP is 504. I understand that. But I just ask that you go and ask questions and make sure that all the kids are being safe or being treated safely. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
If anyone else would like to address the board, they may do so at this time. Seeing no one.
I'll
do
reach
you-
out to Mom.
Okay, so if you could get your contact information to Mr. Miller, he will
I'll stick around.
like to have a conversation with you so we can see what we can do. Certainly, our policies are intended, and our intent is to create a safe environment for all of our students, and we'll certainly work towards making that happen. Jeremiah had a lot of thoughts on different issues that we're dealing with and we have policies on. I think our goal is to make sure that we're educating all students. I don't think we're trying to put any agenda or anything on anyone. Follow the laws and the rules and the code of conduct for all of our students. And I don't know if you'd like to add anything else, Mr. Miller?
No, just that I think maybe what goes on in the classrooms and in the schools might be a little bit different than your perception. Might be a little bit different. And I also hate Common Core.
We all hate Common Core.
True.
All right. So with that, we will go to closing comments, and I will start with Mr. Miller.
I don't remember if you brought it up or not, but just as a reminder, one quick thing that tomorrow at 2 p.m. at West is a celebration of the girls' state championship team. So hope to see everybody there for that.
I've
said
said
enough.
I'm sorry, was that tomorrow, you said?
Yes.
I don't have any final comments.
I sent a text last week.
Nothing tonight.
I delete yours.
I have nothing. I'm exhausted.
No more comments.
For those who, I know, again, we had, like we said, a difference of opinion here on some wanted 9/12, some wanted nothing. I do want to say for those families that are still struggling in that 10-12 range, the Edge Center and the Boys and Girls Club are strong after-school programs for our kids. If people want to be able to take advantage of those programs to have an option until they do get off work, that is a good thing to consider.
There's
And
a West Edge program too.
Right. Yep. So that's a great program for all of our students to take advantage of and be able to access. So hopefully people will do that. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes.